Imagine you want to buy something from another country. Maybe it's a unique gadget, a rare book, or even a special food item you can't find at home. The world feels smaller than ever, with goods and services flowing across borders every second of the day. But to make that purchase, you need a currency the seller will accept. Money, in its many forms, is the bridge that connects buyers and sellers from every corner of the globe. For decades, the US dollar has been the world's go-to currency, especially for vital resources like oil. Whether you're in Asia, Africa, or Europe, chances are, big international deals are done in dollars. When one currency dominates global trade, it gives its home country enormous influence. The dollar's reach extends far beyond America's borders, shaping economies and decisions worldwide. The US dollar's dominance began after World War II, when nations agreed to use it for international business. This decision, at the Bretton Woods Conference, set the stage for decades of American financial leadership. Central banks worldwide hold large reserves of dollars to pay for imports and stabilize their own currencies. These reserves act as a safety net, helping countries weather economic storms and maintain trust in their economies. This constant demand benefits the US, making it easier to borrow money and wield financial power globally. The US can finance its spending at lower costs, and its financial markets become magnets for global investment. The US can even use its currency to impose sanctions, shaping international relations without military force. By restricting access to the dollar, it can pressure countries and companies to change their behavior. Currency dominance creates stability, but also an imbalance of power. Smaller economies often have to play by the rules set by the dominant currency, sometimes at the expense of their own interests. The country with the dominant currency sets the rules for the global economy. It can influence trade agreements, lending terms, and even the pace of global growth. For decades, that's been the United States. Its financial institutions, like Wall Street and the Federal Reserve, have become symbols of global economic power. But now, some countries are questioning this system and seeking alternatives. Nations like China and Russia are exploring new ways to trade without relying on the dollar, hoping to carve out more independence. The story of which currency buys oil is really a story about global leadership. Whoever controls the currency of trade holds a powerful tool in shaping the world's future. The US dollar's reign has shaped the world order, but change is in the air. New alliances, digital currencies, and shifting economic power are challenging the old system. As new challengers emerge, the financial map of our world could be redrawn. The next dominant currency might come from a rising power, or even from a technology we haven't fully imagined yet. Understanding currency power is key to understanding today's global shifts. It's not just about money, it's about influence, security, and the future of international cooperation. The quiet strength of money can rival armies and weapons. In many ways, financial influence can achieve what force cannot, shaping destinies without a single shot fired. The next chapter in this story is unfolding right now. As the world watches, the balance of financial power is shifting, and the outcome will affect us all. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway between Iran and Oman, is the world's most critical energy chokepoint. About 1/5 of all global oil passes through this bottleneck daily. Countries like China, Japan, and India rely on this route for their energy needs. Any disruption here sends oil prices soaring and shakes the global economy. Iran's long coastline gives it significant control over this vital passage. Tensions often flare, with threats to close the strait during conflicts. The US and its allies have always worked to keep it open, knowing a blockage would be a global crisis. In early 2026, attacks on Iranian territory nearly halted shipping, causing oil prices to spike. 16 vessels were struck, and oil flow almost stopped. The world felt the shock instantly. The strait's vulnerability exposes a critical weakness in the global system. So much of the world's economy depends on oil moving through this narrow, contested waterway. Any disruption here is felt everywhere. The stakes could not be higher. In the 1970s, the United States and Saudi Arabia struck a historic deal that would quietly transform the global economy for decades to come. Under this agreement, Saudi oil would be sold exclusively in US dollars, and in return, the US promised military protection and support for the Saudi regime. This arrangement was more than just a trade deal, it was a strategic alliance that tied the world's most valuable resource to America's currency. Soon, other major oil producers followed Saudi Arabia's lead, cementing what became known as the petrodollar system. Oil, the lifeblood of modern economies, could now only be bought with US dollars. This forced every country, whether friend or rival, to hold large reserves of dollars to buy oil, driving up global demand for the currency and making the dollar the world's undisputed reserve currency. With the world hungry for dollars, the US could borrow at lower costs and print more money with less fear of inflation, knowing that global markets would absorb the supply. The petrodollar system handed America immense economic and geopolitical power, allowing it to influence global finance and politics far beyond its borders. Most international oil deals pass through the US financial system, giving Washington the ability to monitor, approve, or block transactions and decide who gets access to the world's most important markets. Economic sanctions became a powerful weapon. Countries locked out of the dollar system found themselves unable to trade, invest, or even buy basic goods, often with devastating consequences for their economies. This quiet financial leverage often proved more effective than military force, allowing the US to shape global events without firing a shot. For decades, the petrodollar has been the invisible foundation of global finance, underpinning trade, investment, and the very structure of international relations. But what if a major oil producer decided to break the rules and sell oil in another currency? Such a move could send shockwaves through the global economy. The world is now facing that very question, as new alliances and rivalries threaten to upend the old order. For the first time in half a century, the petrodollar's dominance is being seriously challenged by emerging powers and alternative currencies. The outcome could reshape the global balance of power, with consequences for every nation and every person on the planet. The stakes have never been higher. Iran has announced a bold new policy: oil tankers can only pass through the Strait of Hormuz if their oil is paid for in Chinese yuan, not US dollars. This is a direct challenge to the petrodollar system. Iran is using its control over the world's most important oil choke point to bypass US sanctions. By demanding yuan, Iran opens the door to trade with China and others willing to use the Chinese currency. This move shifts the conflict from military threats to financial rules. Iran is leveraging its geography to force a change in how oil is bought and sold. The world is watching to see how the US and other powers will respond. The rules of global trade are being rewritten in real time. For years, power in the Strait of Hormuz meant warships and missiles. Now, Iran is fighting with currencies, not guns. Instead of blocking all ships, Iran allows passage only for oil paid in yuan. The US Navy can escort tankers, but it can't force Iran to accept dollars. This exposes the limits of military power when faced with financial resistance. Control over payment networks is proving as powerful as control over sea lanes. Iran, with a smaller military, is using economic tools to challenge US dominance. This new form of conflict is subtle, strategic, and hard to counter. The battlefield has shifted from the sea to the global financial system. Economic weapons are now shaping international relations. The rules of power are changing. Iran's new policy wouldn't work without China. China is the world's top oil importer and buys over 90% of Iran's oil exports. This partnership is Iran's economic lifeline and the backbone of the Yuan for oil policy. For years, Iran has sold oil to China in yuan to bypass US sanctions. China has built its own payment system, CIPS, to handle international yuan transactions. This infrastructure lets China and Iran trade outside the US-dominated financial system. For Iran, it's survival and leverage. For China, it's a step toward making the yuan a global currency. China secures energy and gains influence without military force. This alliance quietly challenges the existing world order. The yuan's rise is reshaping global finance. The partnership is a strategic win for both nations. Iran's policy hasn't stopped oil shipments, it's split them into two systems. Tankers carrying oil paid for in yuan, mostly bound for China, pass through the strait without issue. Others, especially those paid for in dollars, are blocked or delayed. India, for example, has struggled to get its tankers through, with many vessels stranded. Iran's foreign minister confirmed passage depends on political ties and payment currency. The strait has become a tool of Iranian foreign policy. Countries must choose a stick with the dollar and risk supply, or adapt to Iran's rules and use Yuan. Iran is exporting nearly 1 million barrels a day, despite pressure. This dual system puts immense strain on the dollar-based order. The world is being forced to adapt. Iran's move at the Strait of Hormuz is shaking the global economy. Oil prices have spiked, fueling market volatility and raising costs for consumers and businesses. Central banks may now need to hold more yuan, not just dollars, to buy oil. This could gradually erode the dollar's dominance and make US borrowing more expensive. China stands to gain as the yuan's global role grows. Other countries may welcome a more multipolar financial system. The ripple effects are just beginning. The global economic landscape is being reshaped. The events unfolding in the Strait of Hormuz could mark the beginning of the end for the petrodollar's unchallenged reign, a system that has shaped global finance for decades. For the first time in modern history, a major oil trade is happening outside the dollar system, signaling a dramatic shift in how the world's most vital commodity is bought and sold. Iran and China are proving that alternatives are not just theoretical, they're possible, and they're happening now, right before our eyes. This isn't the result of a war or a sudden crisis, but a deliberate shift in trade rules, a quiet financial revolution that could reshape the global order. The world won't abandon the dollar overnight. Change will be gradual, but the process has undeniably started, and momentum is building. If other oil producers decide to follow this path, the dollar's dominance in global energy markets will inevitably fade, opening the door to new possibilities. The United States will lose some of the economic and geopolitical advantages it has long enjoyed, as its influence over global trade and finance begins to wane. Sanctions, once a powerful tool of US foreign policy, will become less effective if countries can simply use other systems and currencies to bypass restrictions. A multipolar world is emerging, one where several reserve currencies coexist, and no single nation holds all the cards. The US and its allies will undoubtedly fight to defend the dollar's position, using every tool at their disposal to maintain their influence. But the idea that all oil must be traded in dollars has now been breached, and that precedent cannot be undone. The future may be a world where the dollar is just one of several key currencies, sharing the stage with others in a more balanced global system. The slow sunset of dollar dominance has begun, with a single tanker of oil, a new rule at a narrow strait, and the world watching what comes next.